You probably have a smaller circle of friends right now than you did 10 years ago. And the weird part? You're completely fine with it. The name's Frank, and I've spent a good chunk of time studying the way your generation moves through the world. Not the big stuff, not the wars, not the politics, the quiet stuff. The stuff that explains why, right now, your ideal Saturday looks nothing like it did in 1991, and why the idea of having to make small talk with 15 people you sort of know sounds about as appealing as a root canal without the numbing shot. Small circle, by choice. Most people would look at that and say something is wrong, that you've pulled back, that you're lonely and just don't know it. A whole generation of researchers, articles, and well-meaning advice columnists want to fix you. But there's a problem with that story. You didn't accidentally end up with 2 or 3 real friends. You got there on purpose. And once you understand it, and I mean really understand it, all the way back to where it started, you'll stop wondering if you should feel guilty about it. So, buckle up. Or don't. You don't need to be told what to do. That's kind of the whole point.
AARP has been surveying Americans over the age of 45 about loneliness for years, and across multiple waves of their research, the numbers keep landing in the same territory. Roughly 4 in 10 adults in midlife report feeling lonely at least some of the time. In some survey years, that number has climbed even higher. That gets a lot of attention. People write articles, they worry about it. But buried in the same conversation is something nobody really talks about. The Survey Center on American Life, run by the American Enterprise Institute, published a major report on American friendship in 2021. And what they found was that younger generations are significantly more anxious about whether they have enough friends than older ones. Gen Z, your kids' generation, the ones who grew up with phones glued to their hands and 200 followers and a group chat for every occasion, they are considerably more stressed about their friend count than you are. You're not lonely, you're just selective, and there's a pretty big difference between the two. Now, the interesting question, and this is the one that actually matters, is why? Why are you this way? Because you didn't just decide one day to start caring less. Something built this in you a long time ago. And that's where things get interesting. Part 2. The childhood nobody planned. Think back to being a kid, not the nostalgia version, the actual version. The divorce rate in the United States peaked around 1979 to 1981, hitting roughly 5.3 divorces per 1,000 people, the highest rate ever recorded in this country, according to the National Center for Health Statistics, right when you were growing up. The family that had been the default, 2 parents, one of them usually home, started quietly falling apart all around your neighborhood. And even in homes where nobody divorced, both parents were working. Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows maternal workforce participation surging throughout the 1970s and 1980s. That was the new normal, which meant you came home to an empty house. The Census Bureau estimated that by the mid-1980s, millions of school-aged children were regularly unsupervised after school. They called you latchkey kids. You just called it Tuesday, which meant somewhere between 3rd grade and junior high, you figured out something that a lot of people never figure out: how to be okay by yourself. Now, here's the part that people miss. Being alone as a kid doesn't just teach you how to entertain yourself. It teaches you something much deeper. It teaches you that you can handle things, that you don't need someone to show up and save you. That the gap between "I need help" and "I'll figure it out" is something you can cross on your own. That's a gift, a real one. But here's what came along with it, whether you asked for it or not. When you grow up waiting for adults to come home, when the people who are supposed to be there aren't always there, you develop a very specific relationship with trust. You stop assuming people will show up. You start watching, you start noticing who follows through and who doesn't. You start taking things as they come instead of expecting things to be fine. Developmental psychologists who have studied children of divorce and latchkey kids have documented this pattern extensively. Kids who experience early independence in the context of parental absence tend to develop what researchers describe as a cautious approach to trust, one where reliability must be demonstrated, not assumed. And for Gen X, this pattern showed up across an entire generation at once. Trust isn't assumed, it's earned every time. And here's what that does over time. It makes you very slow to let people in. Very slow. Not rude, not cold, just careful. So when you do let someone in, when you do call someone a real friend, it means something completely different than it does for someone who hands out that title in the first 3 conversations. This caused something, which led to something else.
By the time you got to high school and college, you had a skill set that most people don't develop until their 40s, if they ever develop it at all. You knew how to be independent. You knew how to read people quickly. You knew how to spot someone who was going to let you down before they actually did it. Generational researchers and psychologists who study Gen X have described this pattern consistently. Vulnerability for your generation tends to be kept private, shared only in close and deeply trusted circles. And the important part is this: that emotional guardedness is not coldness. It is carefully built armor, shaped over decades of learning to protect what matters most. Armor is a funny word for it, because armor has a bad reputation. People hear emotionally guarded and they think damaged, closed off, unable to connect. But think about what armor actually does. It doesn't stop you from connecting. It just makes sure that when you do connect, it's real, that the person on the other side of that door actually knocked, that they waited, that they proved over time that they weren't going to disappear. Your circle is small because your door is solid. Now here's where it gets a little uncomfortable, because there's another side to this. All that self-reliance, all that "I don't need anyone" energy, it also made it harder to ask for help when you genuinely needed it. It made it harder to say "I'm struggling" out loud. It made it easier to handle things quietly in a way that, over time, adds up. That's not a character flaw. That's what happens when a kid figures out too early that nobody's coming. The skill that kept you safe became the habit you carry into every room. Self-reliance, the skill that saved you, and the habit that sometimes costs you. The grunge bands knew it. Kurt Cobain's lyrics were full of alienation, absent parents, emotional walls. Pearl Jam's early albums, Alive, Jeremy, and Black, dealt directly with family dysfunction, absent fathers, the weight of feelings nobody taught you how to carry. Beck turned generational detachment into an anthem. That whole soundtrack of your teenage years wasn't just noise, it was your generation collectively processing exactly this. The kids who grew up with absent or unavailable parents turning their frustration into art. Music historians like Michael Azerrad have documented how grunge was, at its core, the sound of Gen X working through what their childhoods had done to them. Your culture told you it was okay to feel this, it just never quite told you what to do about it. But you kept going, because that's what you do. Here's the thing that makes this whole conversation take a turn. A professor named Robin Dunbar, a British anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist at the University of Oxford, spent decades studying how people form social connections. He's best known for Dunbar's number, the idea that humans can maintain roughly 150 stable relationships. But what most people don't know is that his model includes nested layers. And the innermost layer, what he calls the support clique, is typically about 5 people. In his 2021 book, Friends, Understanding the Power of Our Most Important Relationships, Dunbar laid out the research clearly. Your well-being, your actual measurable psychological and physical health, is most strongly predicted by the quality of that innermost circle. Not the outer rings, not the acquaintances, the 5, sometimes 3. 3 to 5. Not 50, not the high school class reunion attendance list, not the number of people who wished you happy birthday on Facebook in 2019. 3 to 5. That's it. Those are the relationships that actually move the needle on whether you feel okay in the world. Which means the thing you've been doing, the thing people have quietly been suggesting is a problem, is basically what the research says you're supposed to be doing. You didn't shrink your circle because something went wrong, you refined it. Without knowing there was a word for it, without a psychology textbook in hand, you landed on exactly what the data says works. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what about that loneliness number? If having 3 solid friends is the answer, why are so many people your age reporting that they feel lonely? That's the right question. And the answer is what nobody wants to say out loud. Part 5. The squeeze nobody warned you about. Here's what happened after the armor went up and the circle got small. You got older. Your kids needed you. Your parents started needing you. The job didn't slow down. The money conversations got bigger. And the 2 or 3 people in that inner circle, those solid, real, earned friendships, the ones that took years to build, life got in the way. Pew Research Center data shows that Gen X is the generation most heavily represented in the so-called sandwich generation, adults simultaneously caring for aging parents and supporting children who are still at home. A 2022 Pew study found that roughly 1 in 4 U.S. adults is in this position, and Gen X bears the heaviest load. Between caregiving in both directions, managing careers, and everything else that comes with midlife, the friendships, which were never loud or needy to begin with, became the thing that quietly got put on the back burner. And here's the thing about Gen X friendships specifically. The Survey Center on American Life found in their 2021 report that men in particular are increasingly likely to go extended periods without having a meaningful personal conversation with a close friend. The friendship is real, the wire is just silent. And a silent wire, over time, starts to feel like no wire at all. This is the part where the small circle stops being just a preference and starts becoming a risk. Because the armor that kept you safe in childhood, the self-reliance, the ability to handle things alone, the low tolerance for asking for help, that same armor can make it easier to let the silence stretch, to assume the friendship is fine because you haven't checked in a while, to say, I'm good to everyone, including yourself, even when you're not entirely sure that's true. The circle is small because you built it that way. The wire goes quiet because life is loud. Those are 2 different problems. One is a feature, one is something to watch.
So let's lay this out cleanly, because you don't like things buried in 5 layers of explanation. You grew up in a time when you had to figure things out yourself. That built independence. That independence built armor. The armor made you careful about who you let close. Being careful about who you let close meant your circle ended up small. And your small circle, as it turns out, is exactly the right size, according to decades of social science research that your generation arrived at by accident. That's not a tragic story. That's actually kind of impressive. You solved the friendship problem before anyone wrote the paper about it. The people out there with enormous social circles, showing up at every party, collecting contacts like trading cards, they're not doing better than you. Multiple studies across journals like the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology have consistently found that people who invest their time in a small number of close relationships report higher life satisfaction, handle stress more effectively, and show greater empathy than those spreading themselves thin across large networks of casual connections. The research isn't ambiguous on this. Depth beats width. You chose depth over width, and depth wins. But, and this is the part that matters, depth requires maintenance. Not a lot of it, not daily check-ins or long phone calls about feelings. You don't have to become a different person. But the research on friendship maintenance shows something genuinely useful. It doesn't take grand gestures to keep a friendship alive. It takes small, consistent signals, what some researchers call maintenance behaviors. A short message, a 2-minute voice memo about nothing in particular, a text that says, saw this and thought of you. That's it. The bar is low. The only thing that kills a strong friendship is total silence over a long enough stretch. 2 minutes. You spent more time looking for the TV remote. The point is, the wire doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to not go dead. The part no one else will tell you. Here is the thing that this whole conversation has been building toward. You did not end up with a small circle because the world chewed you up. You ended up with a small circle because you decided, maybe without even deciding, that real is worth more than a lot. That one person who actually knows you beats 15 people who know your name. That trust takes time, and anything worth having takes time. That belief came from somewhere hard.
It came from empty houses and missing parents, and a cultural moment that handed a whole generation independence before they were old enough to want it. It came from grunge albums and cynicism, and learning to roll your eyes at anything that seemed too easy. You didn't lower your standards, you raised them, early, without knowing it. The only thing science has to add to what you already figured out is this: you were right. And the thing to watch isn't the size of your circle, it's the silence between the people in it. Because a small circle that stays warm is the whole game. 3 people who actually know you, who you'd call at midnight if something fell apart, that is better than any party you've ever left early. And if you happen to know someone like that, someone you haven't talked to in a while because life got loud, you've been listening to this for 23 minutes. You know what to do. If this resonated with you, hit the like and subscribe button below. And check out one of the videos on the screen next. See you there.